We're excited about a couple things coming up, so I invite you to spend the hour with us here on The Beat. We'll get to that Jurassic Park wild and somewhat uplifting stuff by the end of the hour. We begin, though, with something less uplifting but very important, and that is how an experiment in both governance and billionaire power grabs is ending. And it's kind of different than what we might have thought when it began. Elon Musk leaving his government work. And he made this what is basically an admitted exit kind of interview, final appearance with the president. And as with other situations with loud, powerful, or political people, sometimes even when they admit something or reality suggests something, like he has less power than he did on day one and he's leaving, we're still hearing that he'll be around.
So I expect to remain a friend and an advisor. And certainly, if there's anything the president wants me to do, I'm at the president's service.
Elon has worked tirelessly helping lead the most sweeping and consequential government reform program in generations.
Will the real president please stand up, you might say, to paraphrase Eminem? Elon Musk standing over the proceedings, a kind of physical way that he likes to announce himself, just as he did in cabinet meetings. But of course, the real president, seated, was watching him stand up to go. And while they said some nice things about each other, let's be clear that on the evidence, which is how we all try to keep track of things, if we're being serious in journalism or policy, you have to count it up. A lot of these things did not work as they were claimed to work. A lot of these so-called savings did not materialize. And that's before you even get to counting up the cost of some of these cuts. Now, Musk set out to save $150 billion. That's what he says he might have gotten. Of course, that's far less than the trillions he promised, and he is leaving. He could have taken a permanent position where he'd have to do more transparency or divest, but instead, he's getting out of Dodge. There are independent reports which suggest if you look at actual verified savings and not the sort of rosy estimates, you get down to 16 billion. In federal dollars, when you talk about multi-year programs, that's actually a tiny slice. The New York Times reports that the approach, what I just mentioned, how the things work, the firings, and then sometimes rehirings, the productivity loss, paid leave for the people that they fired when they didn't really have a plan worked out, also adds upwards of 135 billion in the fiscal year. Now, because this was so chaotic and fast, they, the government, and they, the New York Times and reports, and we here at MSNBC cannot give you a full and exact accounting. I can just show you that when it's all said and done, he may have cost more than he saved, and he was supposed to be Mr. Savings. Now, we don't know why different information leaks out when it does, but on this tough news day for Mr. Musk and a tough day for him in politics as he kind of steps back, there are quite serious reports about his use of drugs while cozying up to Trump on the campaign trail as recently as last year. Now, Times puts it that he was using drugs more intensely than previously known. The article lists, quote, ketamine, ecstasy, psychedelic mushrooms, Adderall. Now, that is a serious set of claims. And while people can debate what private individuals do, whether it breaks the law or not, and how newsworthy that is, this matters for someone who is wielding government power, who was overseeing programs where they fire people. Some people in the federal government can be removed for drug use. He was working as a special employee in the federal government, and the Times is reporting about that. I also want to tell you that while that's in the Times, NBC News has not confirmed it. Now, Musk has discussed some of these issues. Take a listen.
But you've admitted that you have a ketamine subscription, prescription.
Yeah.
Do you think you're inebriated when you do ketamine?
No, if you do a lot of ketamine, then you're inebriated. If you do a small amount, you're not.
That's my question about, do you ever abuse it? That's why
I don't think so.
That was an exchange there with journalist Don Lemon, who was then ousted from X, which Musk had bought after that interview. I do want to note in the timeline, because some of this has to do with his political and government activities, the interview itself there was before the campaign time that he was spending with Trump. And the Times reports that it did go, they say, and they're reporting, his usage was beyond what you might call, quote, occasional use. Now, with regard to whether this affects his wielding of federal powers, that report does not state whether this was happening in the last 120 days during this period. Musk also sidestepping a question about it at that press conference. He went on the attack against journalism instead of just addressing it. The White House also put out statements praising Musk, but has not addressed those issues separately. All of this news is coming as Musk is leaving an operation where even he doesn't claim he succeeded, leaving public service having lost many billions of dollars because the public had views about his service and it affected him. And he is now distancing himself from at least some Trump policies.
It's not like I agree with everything the administration does. I'm a little stuck in a bind where I'm like, well, I don't want to, speak out against the administration, but I don't want to. I also don't want to take responsibility for everything the administration is doing.
Welcome to public service. The difference between Musk and virtually everyone else who signs up to work for a president is most people treat it like the serious full-time job that it is. They take an oath to the Constitution. They understand as long as you're in that job, you do the thing he said he didn't want to do. You have to go along with the values and plans of the person you work for, in this case, the president, or if you reach a breaking point, you quit. Musk is again trying to have it both ways, and he has clearly basked in some of the power and attention of being tied to the president and donating a lot of money to the president when they were running last year, while also wanting to make the break in ways that benefit or matter to him. He did express disagreement with aspects of that budget, and he noted that it is in conflict with his supposed goal of saving money, which he's leaving having not achieved. Meanwhile, we have the tariffs, which many business leaders continue to oppose. The way Trump launched them, how they've affected chaotic markets, this week getting a court setback. The Treasury Secretary is still going back and forth about how Trump's inconsistent messaging towards China on whether there'll be high, medium, or low tariffs, how that's affecting negotiations there.
I would say that they are a bit stalled.
So stalled, there was a time when the president thought that it was moving forward pretty significantly.
Again, I think that given the magnitude of the talks, given the complexity, that this is going to require both leaders to weigh in with each other.
That's the Trump perspective. Those are the people defending how this is going. And I guess because they've dealt with so much reality, setbacks, market feedback, they're finding that just lying or claiming that things are perfect doesn't work. So we're hearing a still best case scenario of failed trade war policies. We've gone from 90 deals in 90 days to maybe we're going to get a deal to the deals are stalled. Now, there's a report that says this trade war thus far has already cost over $30 billion. Not all of that will be felt by people overnight. Reuters making the point that the lost sales, the higher costs, will kind of spread out as costs across the economy, and they'll be paid by a lot of regular people. Here's a toy company CEO speaking out today.
Because the rules change every 2 days, like we're stuck in some sort of telenovela, you don't really know what to do. We are constantly making decisions with guesses because we don't know what the rules are. This is our own government doing this to us, which is shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
That continues to happen. And while on some days the trade war might not feel like big news, it might not have another inflection point, it is the daily life and setback of so many of these companies and businesses. This is not necessarily at this point a big story about ideology. It's become a story about competence and incompetence. A U.S. government led by Donald Trump claiming we're going to do this thing and then failing to do that thing, and then the thing they're doing costing Americans a lot of money. And the whole point in the beginning was it was going to save us money or make us stronger against other countries. Over at the ports, the reporting shows the inconsistency is taking its toll. One official saying one day it makes sense to ship, the next day it doesn't. Over in Europe, a trade negotiator says it doesn't make any sense to negotiate about tariffs that might be proved illegal, citing the U.S. court ruling against Trump this week. The courts leave some latitude for Congress and the president to do normal tariffing and normal trade work. That's why if you think back, even if you're not following it that closely, you might not remember huge court rulings against the trade policies of the last several presidents in both parties. But Trump on this issue, like on immigration, has pushed these laws past the breaking point. And that's why he's getting adverse rulings. Take the Fox News sister outlet, the Wall Street Journal. Their very pro-trade, pro-Wall Street editorial board says it's time that court ruling put Trump, he's the chief executive, put Trump in his proper constitutional place, noting he is no tariff king, and he's not supposed to be. Some Republicans are pointing out the obvious problems. Karl Rove, the Bush Republican who at times has clashed with Trump, says their messaging is a muddled mess and Trump's chaotic trade war badly damages Republicans, he warns, going into the midterms. So, is it as bad as it looks, or is it worse? That's the fairest way you can put it, even if you only cite sources like the Wall Street Journal and Karl Rove, to say nothing of other independent analysts and liberal critics who say Trump's second 100 days are even more of a disaster than the first, which is why he's losing from the markets to the courts. So how do you make sense of this while also not just living in the box and repeating the norms? We always like to bring in independent voices. And boy, do I have one for you tonight. CNBC veteran, MSNBC veteran, longtime reporter, financial expert, and big thinker, Dylan Ratigan, when we return in 90 seconds. We are back with a veteran of CNBC, MSNBC, financial and political journalism, Dylan Ratigan, also a best-selling author who spoke out years ago about campaign finance reform and money in politics. He has a newsletter on Substack, Notes from Milan. And that's only highlights. Welcome back, Dylan.
Nice to see you. Pleasure to join you from the home office here in Italy.
Sprezzatura, that's what you've always had, if I think of Italian words.
Yes. Thank you.
I pointed out a couple things. I mentioned you're an independent thinker. You're not anti-business. I don't think you have beef with Elon Musk on any great longstanding principle. And yet, on the other hand, he himself says he didn't meet all his goals. He leaves in a kind of a muddled message. And the trade war that Donald Trump is launching doesn't seem to be benefiting American business yet. Your thoughts, and are these related problems?
I mean, no, they're not related. First of all, I think if you were to talk to Elon Musk privately, he would be a severe critic of the way the Trump administration has approached the trade war and the tariffs. So I think you really have to separate those two things. I think we can start with Musk or we can go to tariffs, but you mentioned Musk, and I think that
Musk, start with Musk.
All right. So I think Musk is a cautionary tale for every person that would ever think that intervening in politics. And I think as a compliment to your journalism, not to butter your bread here, but I do think that if you're going to get involved with politics at a national level, you have to be prepared to be associated with policies you do not believe in. And I think that Musk was a little bit naive in the expectation that he could sort of waltz in and offer his 2 cents and not get tarred and feathered with everything else that was associated with the Trump administration. And I'm sure if you talk to Elon Musk privately, he would say the way that the tariffs were handled, even if the tariffs are well-intended relative to restoring the labor market in the U.S., relative to the political pandering that the tariffs represent to the base, the way that they were handled was catastrophic for the markets. The markets have recovered, by the way, but that Musk basically comes out of this looking naive and ultimately did a lot of damage to very valuable enterprises. I think we all believe in Musk's missions relative to EVs, relative to solar power, relative to all those ambitions. And it's unfortunate to see them get mucked up in the standard mess that is American politics. And I think that he learned that the hard way.
I hear you on all that. And you kind of make a distinction that, as you said, he's smart in certain ways, but he's incredibly naive to think that he's co-president or that he has his own platform. You work for the government. You work for this administration. I want to play you Jamie Dimon on the China part. Take a look.
We have problems and we got to deal with them. And then the biggest one underlying both that is the enemy within. I'm not as worried about China. China is a potential adversary. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together, our own values, our own capability, our own management?
I serve this up to you because you know that world, Dylan, and a lot of people Did we lose Dylan in Milan? I'm not sure. Dylan, you can still hear me?
I can, loud and clear. My apologies. How are you?
No, you're great. Great to have you. I was just saying, and folks, bear with us because we got international connection, but a lot of Wall Street folks thought they had this figured out and they would get what they wanted out of Trump. And it's proving to be a rougher ride, what you just alluded to. And so we turn to the tariffs and business people, some of whom are broadly more conservative in economic policy, broadly more Republican, if not always MAGA. There is some buyer's remorse seeping out. And then there's the hidden remorse that isn't public because people are worried about retaliation. What do you see there?
I see a market that has deemed Donald Trump and the Trump administration completely lacking in credibility. If you look at the stock market, if you look at the bond market, they now view everything that is stated regarding Trump and tariffs as basically empty rhetoric. So if you look at the market's response in April, where they actually took the policy suggestions seriously, there was a repricing of the value of all global business down. We all saw it. Then we've seen the walkbacks from the Trump administration where it becomes more of a it's a TV event. Oh, we're going to make a deal. Oh, it's 50%. Oh, it's no for 0%, all these things. And so at this point, the reason the stock market is basically at the same level it was, a few months ago, well before the trade war, is because the stock market has decided none of this is actually going to happen, or it's going to happen to such a limited degree that it really is nothing more than Trump rhetoric pandering to his base, and it's not so much an economic policy. I think that the soundbite that you offered up, which is that it does introduce a level of uncertainty to business in general on the outside chance some of this actually does happen. But if you look at the financial markets, they're saying this is rhetoric, it is not policy, and that is basically a insult to the president.
And when's the last time, or in your adult life and career, do you remember the markets getting to this point, disbelieving a president and an administration this much?
I mean, honestly, yes. I think American politics has become so enslaved to the rhetorical value of policy rather than the economic value of policy. I mean, part of the reason why I feel like Donald Trump is even the president is because I believe the Democratic Party has failed catastrophically to deliver meaningful policy, that both parties are so beholden now to rhetorical pandering to their base that we've actually lost what I would call the professional or executive function in our government, which should actually administrate in a professional manner. And the Trump administration, I think, is probably the most extreme example of that, but it's just the latest iteration of political rhetoric that panders for votes from the extremes on the left or the right, rather than policies that actually advocate for the value or the enterprise that is America. And this is just kind of the most extreme example. But I think the reason this exists is because we've been in the seesaw. I mean, you and I worked together at MSNBC 10 or 15 years ago, and we were seeing the beginning of this. It goes back decades now. And just the longer the cycle continues, the worse it gets. And I think that you're seeing a complete discounting of the Trump administration's credibility relative to the trade war by the financial markets.
And so that brings us to the lens, because how people understand a problem affects whether they think, A, it's fixable, and then what the solution could be. In other words, if you see a problem as like a tornado or a hurricane, you can't stop it. And so you kind of say, we'll deal with it as best we can, right? Whereas if you see a problem like engine failure in a plane and you spot the engine failure before the takeoff, you fix the problem. You avoid at least flying. I say that to be as simple as possible. If Americans view this as a Trump thing and a Trump-Musk thing, and Musk is in and out, and it's a political thing, and it's that lens of those, quote, bad guys is how some people view it, that's one thing. But if this is merely a symptom of a larger breakdown in our ability to have any semblance of honest politics and discourse in the best sense, then Trump is a symptom. And if you don't fix the underlying issues around how we do democracy, how we discourse with each other, and whether the system is fully bought, as you've argued in your writings, or not, then we miss out on even fixing that. Do you think it's more the latter? We have a bigger structural problem here, regardless of Trump.
I do. I believe that extremity and absurdity even of the Trump rhetoric, and then the walkbacks, and then the rhetoric, and then the walkbacks is nothing more than the most extreme expression of the degradation of the overall executive function in American leadership that has been accruing for a long time because of the power of the extremes, because the extreme left or the extreme right has too much of an influence over who becomes the candidate. In this case, the candidate became Donald Trump, and the president became Donald Trump. And that's why, by the way, the financial markets, what were the financial markets doing during the Biden administration? At or near records. What are the financial markets doing during the Trump administration? At or near records. Why? Because they actually don't believe that the ability to follow through and implement coherent executive policy exists. And that is my greatest concern. And again, you talk to that toy executive, and risk is not the Trump policy or some other administration's policy. The risk is the lack of credibility in American executive leadership, period, which is why, by the way, I think, well, despite the strength in the financial markets, meaning the stock market specifically, you are seeing an overall revaluation of the US dollar as a currency lower. And that is really a referendum on the credibility of American leadership more than anything else.
Yeah, and that's a great point, which again goes beyond sometimes the more limited ways we talk politics. You're bringing in a lot of other data, as we say, and it speaks to our standing in the world. I'm over on time, but we started the show with you. And so in closing, Dylan, I want to say not only thank you, but prego.
Grazie a lei, as they say over here. And I do hope to join you again soon. And next time I'll bring a tiramisu.
We love that. We love desserts. Our thanks to Dylan Ratigan. I want to tell folks coming up, we have comic Matt Friend.
I personally like Tucker, but now I really dislike him. He's failing like a dog.
Well, it is humbling news today. As I'm announcing, I am stepping down.
Hey, everybody. This is Barack Obama, and I am here with, I'm actually Barack Obama.
Uncanny. Matt has been on this program years back. He joins us again. You'll see him tonight. As for what Nicole Wallace and I were really discussing, I'm talking about real science, Jurassic Park, scientists who say they have successfully resurrected the extinct dire wolf 10,000 years later. If you haven't heard about this, it's huge. If you've heard about it, we actually have the company's founder, our special guest, tonight. But next, the politics of Trump lashing out as he loses. President Trump has pushed more laws past their breaking point in his first 100+ days than any modern president, including in his first term. How's that going? Here's how. He is losing more and more quickly than any president, including in his first term. 181 rulings that count as losses, which could be setbacks, injunctions, temporary injunctions, or restraining orders, all the different ways you can pause or freeze what he tried to do because he went too far. The big news this week was one of the biggest disappointments for Trump, the federal court's finding that parts of the sweeping tariff and trade war plan are illegal. Now, that's going to be appealed already, and it's going to be litigated, but it's a major setback. Now, one of the judges that struck down the tariffs, basically the bulk of the tariffs, was appointed by President Trump. That's how it's supposed to be, by the way. Judges are supposed to rule on the law. They're not supposed to be harder or softer on any administration because of their history or link to an appointment or the party. It's supposed to be how it basically works. And yet Donald Trump has a different view, and he admits it. It is a type of favoritism, or what some lawyers would call a expectation of corruption, that if he gave someone a job, he wants them to rule for him, even if he broke the law. His allies are now attacking judges in very extreme terms, trying to turn this around and make the judges the ones who are lawless, as you can see in some of these words, when it is exactly the opposite. And Trump has also all but admitted that on the big picks, on the serious major judicial appointments, he's not really in charge. I mean, he's the big president, right? But by how he's going on the attack, he seems to be giving away the game because he's blaming others for his judges. These were his choices, his power. I mean, that's a fact. But he's calling out someone that If you follow the law and legal circles closely, you may have heard of Leonard Leo, who chairs the very powerful Federalist Society. And so he's going public saying Leo, who's worked with him and other Republican presidents, is actually a, quote, real sleazebag, because he blames Leo for the judges who are ruling against him, who he appointed, because he admits he didn't really think it through or do his own research. I guess he's saying he just relied on this powerful man, Leonard Leo. And it is true, we know that Leo played this role in suggesting and vetting judicial nominees. He's done that for prior Republican presidents, he did it for Trump, and he did it at the level of the Supreme Court. Now, that itself is perfectly lawful. That's not itself a scandal, because presidents often rely on advisors and experts to make decisions. It's only now that Trump is saying these terrible things about Mr. Leo. In our legal reporting, we've actually explored this. I asked Leonard Leo about how he was working with then candidate Trump in 2019.
It was Donald Trump, the candidate, Don McGahn, his general counsel, and myself. I had gotten a little bit of a tip-off that this was his idea, so I happened to have a list. And at one point he said, "So what kinds of people would you put on that list?" I said, "Well, I happen to have would you like to see it?"
Leonard Leo almost making light of his influence over something quite huge, picking the very people who will be on our Supreme Court and decide the biggest questions. He gave Trump the list. Trump used most of that list. In a recent Supreme Court decision that blocked Trump's use of the attempt to use the Wartime Enemies Act to deport migrants, it was those people, some of whom have been on Leonard Leo's lists, 3 Trump appointees, that went against him. And that is exactly how it should be when something is illegal. And you can't blame Leonard Leo for it on this one. President knows, and maybe that's why he's so angry. He picked these people, and whatever he did, he has to own in our system. Now, by the end of the hour, we have a friend of the beat making that momentous return with impressions that I know some of you, some beat viewers have told us, are just incredible to hear. Close your eyes and you might think Trump is on the show tonight. But first, this Jurassic Park level breakthrough, seeming to bring a prehistoric animal back to life on Earth. Turning to an incredible breakthrough that taps science but could sound like fantasy. Scientists say they have now essentially resurrected a dire wolf with these beautiful puppies over 10,000 years after that species went extinct. An apparently astounding breakthrough that really does sound like it was ripped from Jurassic Park.
Biotech company Colossal Biosciences says it brought the extinct direwolf back to life, a species that hasn't walked the earth since the Stone Age.
We've taken a gray wolf genome, a gray wolf cell, which is already genetically 99.5% identical to direwolves, and we've edited those cells at multiple places in its DNA sequence to contain the direwolf version of the DNA. That animal looks like a direwolf. It will behave like a direwolf.
People think it's a scary word, de-extinction. They immediately put us with Jurassic Park, and it's not. We're trying to develop these new techniques in order to save animals.
It's cutting-edge work with promise. Some say peril, and others argue perhaps exaggeration if the pups are not actually genetically 100% identical to the extinct species. We are in a new frontier, and for all of the talk about government funding and science and research in the future budgets, this is happening right now, and we have a special guest. Ben Lamb is the co-founder and CEO of Colossal Biosciences. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. What have you done here through the company and the research, and why would it be a good thing?
Yeah, so Colossal is the world's first de-extinction and species preservation company. And to your point, there's a lot of people around the world losing funding. We're a private company who's actually developing technologies for conservation as well as for de-extinction, because right now it's kind of forecasted that we could lose up to 50% of all biodiversity between now and 2050. And we need new tools for conservation. And these pursuits help us advance science to the next level while also helping conservation. So we're pretty excited about our direwolves.
Is it just exciting and neat, I obviously have discussed why it's interesting to people tonight. Or does it do something for the natural world? Do you have a way where eventually animals would be reintroduced to the real ecosystem?
Yeah, it's great because one, it does a lot for conservation in terms of developing new tools and technologies. The dire wolves themselves got all the headlines because of Game of Thrones and because it's the first time extinct genes had ever been brought back to life. But we actually made 4 red wolves. And so the technologies that we use to actually bring back the dire wolf helped us invent a new technology that can be used to clone mammals with simply a blood draw, which is non-invasive. And the red wolf is the most endangered wolf on the entire planet. It's only endemic here in the US. So we actually made more red wolves using this technology. And these are the types of innovations and breakthroughs that we need for conservation. And some of these wolves will actually, the red wolves specifically, will actually be integrated back into the breeding population and put back into the wild to help save that population from going extinct.
Wow. I got to ask you, could it ever actually happen for any dinosaurs or animals of that vintage?
So we get the dinosaur, the 2 questions we get all the time is, one, dinosaurs, and then can we make things like mythical creatures like dragons? And regardless of whether you're a Jurassic Park fan or not, there is no dino DNA. And sometimes people get mad at us, sometimes people get excited about that. But right now we're working with 1.2 million year old DNA for some of our woolly mammoth projects, but we can't go back 65 million years. So there just isn't dino DNA. So I don't really see dinosaurs in our future, only in our past.
Ben, maybe you need to think big. Maybe that's the problem.
We're trying to solve a pretty big, the loss of biodiversity is a major, right? And we know what the trajectory looks like. We know it's pretty bad. So if we can develop tools to help conservation, also inspire kids, and also develop tools that can even some of them be applied to human healthcare, we think it's a win. So this is kind of our big audacious plan to kind of help the planet, inspire the next generation, and also develop tools and technologies for human healthcare along the way.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. There's been a ton of news even late into this week and Friday night, but we really wanted to get this in and show people not only why it matters, but a bit of an antidote to, as you mentioned, the slashing budget cuts for science and other things. It's a different way to look at it. Appreciate you briefing us, Ben Lamb. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it. When we come back, we end the week on the same high note. When you're Obama's favorite Obama impression, you might be onto something. Matt Friend, next. Politics has people down for all kinds of reasons, but we welcome levity even when it touches on politics, which brings us to someone many Beat guests have come to enjoy. Many Beat viewers have enjoyed, I should say, this great Beat guest, the actor, comic, and impressionist Matt Friend, known for the impressions, including someone who's become a fan, President Obama.
Hey, everybody. This is Barack Obama, and I am here with, I'm actually Barack Obama. Well, actually, Barack, Mr. President. This is an impression not just for red states or blue states, but this is a voice for these United States.
Amen. And back with us right here is a comic Matt Friend. Welcome back.
I am so excited to be here. This is the show that I think got my career started. So thank you for having me back. I love coming on with you.
Well, thank you. That's great to hear because we found you on the internet like so many other people. Now
on Truth Social. Yeah. No, TikTok. Sorry. It was that one. Yeah.
Now people can find you a lot of places.
They can. Yeah. On Signal, wherever you get your Pete Hegseth texts, that's where you can find me.
But I'm sure we'll get some of your classics. But, like artists and musicians, we love the new stuff. I want to play a little J.D. Vance, who strikes me as a hard impression. Here's J.D.
There's fundamental mistrust between Russia and the West. It's one of the things the president thinks is frankly stupid, that we should be able to move beyond the mistakes that have been made in the past. But that takes 2 to tango. I know the president's willing to do that.
Well, Ari, the thing is, first of all, I'm offended personally on behalf of all senators in this country. I'm offended. You would even ask me to mimic the sitting vice president of the United States. My Mima and my Peepaw would be very furious at you.
Let's run a little Hakeem, the real one.
Yeah, states like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Illinois and California are donor states. We regularly send billions of dollars more to the federal government than we get back in return. We are donor states.
You're a donor state?
Well, so basically, Hakeem does this thing with his hands. He is painting something in the air. He's like a mime in a box. Now, this is about Donald Trump, Ari, who is a dangerous demagogue. This is America. It is about democracy over demagogue.
So
maturity over Mar-a-Lago. Thank you so much.
So I've noticed
He moves
this
like a white dad at a bar mitzvah.
I've noticed this. You're actually hitting something true.
Yes.
A lot of politicians use hands extra. I don't know if you get that memo, but his linger, and I think that's why the eye notices. So a lot of times I'll say, we're going to do this. Come back here.
Yeah.
Hakeem will say, we're going to do this, and then it stays up there.
Bernie Sanders does it. I mean, Bernie was Bernie always looks like he's conducting a very tiny Jewish orchestra with his hands all the damn time. I don't know what's happening with this. Well, no.
So I got to go back to the classics.
Yeah, let's go to the classics.
You can guess who I'm going to ask for.
Lauren Boebert in a theater?
You can summon the energy.
Yes, I can.
But you're a smart guy. I'm just going to do a normal question. I'm going to say,
ask the question.
You were elected president.
That's true. Look at this. Look at MSDNC. He's
You
up
were
to
elected
something.
president.
Yeah, that's true.
Then you lost.
Well, actually, it depends who you ask.
And you did then get elected again. What does it feel like now?
Well, I will tell you, what an inappropriate question. He's not even talking about the Biden cover-up, which is a disaster. Let's see if they air that. They probably won't do it. It's MSDNC. Well, I won it like 3 times, maybe 4. It depends who you ask. But it is great. We are flying Qatari. It's the greatest airline. We love it a lot. We love the princes. We love the luxury. But I will tell you, I am going to reopen Alcatraz and put Taylor Swift, Bruce Springsteen, and the failing Jim Comey, who's putting seashells in the beach, which is inappropriate. Seashells, which is not great.
Let's look at you going on the road.
Yes.
Into Fox News.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Was this fun? I'm going to show it. But first, tell me, did you have fun?
I enjoy being in a variety of different circumstances, and I believe you cannot grow as an artist, as a comedian, if you do not put yourself in different environments. Hence the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think it was a mistake there was no comedian this year.
Yeah. Well, do you think they back down since you bring it up?
I really do.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be comedy.
Yeah.
Because it's not just one side in this country. And also the fact that there was no comedian, I thought, was just blatantly backing down.
We promised it. Let's see it.
Sure.
Friend on Fox and Friends.
Sure. Unbelievable to be here with the cast of Get Out. I am thrilled. There's so many problems with the prices. The eggs, the freezing. Women are freezing eggs. That's what they're freezing the eggs. There's none left. They're going to freeze them, which is sad. So you're going to tariff these people. And I know these people. Look at this blonde. She's a great blonde, too. And that is, honestly, I said it last time, my favorite African-American. He is such a great African-American. It's so true.
Did you feel embraced not only in the day, but by perhaps any reaction from the Fox audience?
Did I feel embraced?
That's what I asked you, yeah.
You know, I was literally doing what I always do, you know.
But the Fox viewers, did you hear from them online or in the street?
Yeah, I mean, people reach out. Like, it was funny. Everybody, look, you can't make everybody happy. And I'm just going to try to do what I do and have my own level of integrity behind. I'm not going to change my comedy or my opinions on things because I'm talking to somebody or because I'm in some room.
Yeah.
Who I am and what my comedy is has to remain consistent. And I think in today's day and age, it's very easy to tell when somebody is doing just that.
Respect.
Yeah.
You got it.
All right, you're like if Christopher Wallace and Nicole Wallace had a baby.
There's a former president who loves your work.
Yeah.
And you've appeared with him.
Okay.
And eagle-eyed viewers will know who I'm talking about.
That is true. Thank you.
I want to look at you guys together again because we love it. Let's take a...
I appreciate that. Let's hear that.
While we're listening to Barack Obama,
that's what we're doing. Yes.
One of the things that I know Barack Obama is interested in is making sure everybody votes. That is true. Barack Obama is urging young people to get out and vote in this very consequential election. Am I right? You are absolutely right. Thank you. Listen to somebody who knows what they're talking.
So right after that interaction, I actually took out my McConnell glasses and I go, Barack, it really is thrilling to be with you in the same room again. And then he just looks at me and he goes, you got to put those glasses away. That is giving me serious PTSD.
Matt Friend, great to have you.
Ari Melber,
appreciate you.
Arguably the greatest duo in news since the Ducey father and Ducey son.
There we go. Bye, everyone.
Good night, America. You've got to get mad.
Thanks for watching The Beat.